Thanks, Kate. So I'm going to go through some pieces of sourcing legislation first. So to start off with, the forced labor regulation. This regulation aims to eliminate all products made with forced labor from the EU market, regardless of whether they're produced inside or outside the EU. The forced labor regulation does so by requiring EU member states to establish control systems and monitoring authorities to enforce compliance. It comes into effect on the 14th of December 2027, as outlined in this slide, giving companies a transition period to adapt. The scope is wide. It applies to all companies selling goods in the EU, and it covers the entire supply chain from raw materials right through to finished goods. Companies, as part of this regulation, will be required to carry out risk assessments and show clear evidence that forced labour is not present in any part of their supply chain. Failure to comply could lead to fines, bans on the import, sale, or export of affected goods, and potentially orders to dispose of these products. Next, the EUDR, or the European Union Deforestation Regulation. This targets deforestation linked to specific commodities. So from the 30th of June 2025, companies placing products such as the 7 listed, so cattle, cocoa, coffee, soy, palm oil, wood, and rubber, they must prove these do not come from recently deforested land. There are 3 key requirements. First, companies must report geolocation data for where the commodity was sourced. Secondly, they must submit a due diligence declaration to the EU related to the product in question. And thirdly, they must confirm the product was produced in line with local laws, including laws related to human rights. The scope of this regulation includes both EU and non-EU companies. Failure to comply can lead to fines of up to 9% of the company's turnover, so pretty significant. Thirdly, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, referred to commonly as CBAM. This requires the reporting of greenhouse gas emissions factors for importers of carbon-intensive goods, such as iron, steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. If a company imports over 50 tons of these goods per year into the EU, it must become an authorized CBAM importer. It must submit regular CBAM declarations, and it must purchase CBAM certificates to offset the embedded carbon emissions. Currently, CBAM is in a transitional phase, so full implementation will begin in 2026, and the obligation to buy certificates will kick in by February 2027. Non-compliance, again, with CBAM can be expensive, so fines range from €10 to €50 per unreported ton of emissions, and reduced penalties are possible for minor good faith errors. It remains to be seen how this will play out in practice. And finally, for sourcing legislation, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. This directive introduces mandatory due diligence for both human rights and environmental impacts in the supply chain. The aim is to prevent harm to workers, communities, and ecosystems by enforcing responsible business conduct across the supply chain. Implementation of this directive will be phased in starting from 2027, and the first wave of in-scope companies include those with over 5,000 employees and €1.5 billion global turnover. This includes non-EU companies generating the same amount within the EU. The directive zeroes in on high-risk sectors such as agriculture, mining, and textiles, and will require companies to embed due diligence in their operations, actively monitor supply chains, and report on their efforts to do so. Non-compliance can lead to civil liability and fines of at least 5% of global turnover. It's important to note here that amendments were proposed on the 26th of February 2025 as part of an omnibus package, which is currently being negotiated in the European Union. So keep an eye on this as it develops, and we will keep you posted on our website and on our socials as well. So to conclude, each of these regulations reflect a growing push by the EU to hold businesses accountable for social and environmental impacts of their operations and supply chains. Whether it's banning forced labour, ensuring deforestation-free goods, cutting carbon at the border of the EU, or mandating due diligence, these frameworks are and will continue to reshape how the EU does business.